How's it going? And welcome to episode 169 of On the Wire. Proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 Grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hastings can be followed at Hastings Kevin. We have a great show for you lined up today. Our 169th episode, Kevin. Lots to talk about. Actually, not a lot to talk about. We were just talking about that before the show. Like, cut a short news list, but I think some interesting topics that'll, obviously fill the sheet. No problem. But I will. I don't know about you. Don't get the luxury, obviously, of being on the island to attend many major league games. Have you, when you were stateside, did you get to, was it during baseball season or was it just during draft season?
Just prior. I came
Yep.
home like that Wednesday before opening day was Thursday. So probably not going to make it to a live game this year. I definitely make my trip to Arizona every November for First Pitch Arizona. We'll bring that up right at the beginning of the
There
show
you go.
this
Get
week.
it. Yeah. Check that
And
off the list.
start opening on October 31st, Halloween this year. So I make that trip, and then Las Vegas in March. So I typically
Bookends.
every other year I'll throw another trip in the summer, head to see my mom around her birthday, which is tomorrow. Actually, happy birthday to my mom on Saturday, who is not listening, but just in case this one time she might pop in.
Yeah.
But yeah, so about every other year I try to make it to a game at a minimum, sometimes more often. But like a lot of people, really good week, Adam, but a couple of days ago it hit me. I'm not somebody that gets really worked up over deaths of famous people. Sure, I'm sad for them, for their family, for their friends, but it's not something I dwell on. But when I heard the news a couple of days ago about Willie Mays, it hit me. And I was quiet for a long time. Couldn't tell my wife, couldn't tell her why I was upset because I'd lost it. And then a few hours later, finally did. And yeah, rest in peace to one of, if not the greatest to ever do it.
Yeah, and it's the conversation that's being had right now. Not to just kind of jump ahead, but it's interesting because like we're at this point where we're losing these greats, right, of the game at this stage of time, and obviously it's going to happen. It's the natural course of life, but it starts a conversation about like, all right, wow, okay, Willie Mays arguably was the greatest living player, and now he's no longer in that conversation. So where does that conversation go? Obviously it creates a whole different side conversation about what are the requirements, how are you looking at PEDs, how are you looking at production era, all that stuff. And there's a whole lot of conversations happening, on the Twitter, throughout online. There's going to be there's going to be many articles written on this subject. So, I mean, feet to the fire, Kevin. Who was your pick? Like, and does it have to be like, is it naturally has to be a hitter, or is there a pitcher worth having the conversation about as well?
I think there are pitchers worth having the conversation. I just think there's at least a handful of hitters I would put above all of them. Personally, I am a Barry Bonds would get my vote. I understand why some wouldn't. In that case, if I can't vote for Barry Bonds, I've heard this name, but more of an honorable mention, and I think he would be my choice if I can't take Bonds, and that's Mike Schmidt.
Right.
I
Sure.
think he is underrated as an all-time great.
No, I think it's a valid conversation to have. I think at this point, and is a name that I saw a couple times. I think I just go Ricky, just because of the personality, what obviously his production he did on the field, how many teams he did it with, and just who he is and how he was the part of the game, or he was the game for so long. And it goes beyond just hitting home runs or just stealing bases for that matter. It's just how you encompass the game that you're playing on and off the field. So Ricky was at least where my mind goes, without really diving into all the possible choices. Ricky's where obviously Ricky Henderson, for whatever reason,
I
nobody
think
knows
he's a
who I'm
great
talking about.
choice. Great choice, and definitely in the conversation. I think what gets missed lots of times is we of course we know about the stolen bases, and we know he had at least moderate power, had at least 120 home run season at a time when guys that could do that did not hit leadoff.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
what was so cool. Got players like him, Willie McGee, Tim Raines, right? They didn't do that. Tim Raines a little bit more than Willie McGee, but some of those types of players we saw in that era having the power he had as well was absolutely amazing.
yeah, it was fun to be part of it as a obviously somebody growing up with baseball, being able to grow up with those types of players in the game was fun to watch. Um, Anyway, let's talk about the players that are playing right now. As we talk about, of course, there are injuries to talk about, but we're gonna bookend that with some injuries that are looking to come off the books as well, and kind of what we're hoping to do with them or hoping not to do with them throughout the rest of the season as we get closer and closer to that figurative halfway mark of the All-Star game. Kevin, we got to start with what happened right after we were done recording, or at least over the weekend. Mookie Betts, we all know by now, he'll be out at least 6 to 8 weeks with a fractured hand. Did not require surgery, so that's good. Not season ending, or at least Dave Roberts is assuming as much. Um, Obviously, Betts is not happy about the situation. They're being struck in the hand, but seems positive enough to know that he'll be back in. The question, obviously, as we've been able to see throughout the course of the week, is how does this impact the rest of the Dodgers lineup? Who's playing that middle infield slots? And I mean, we already see, obviously, you talked about him last week. Miguel Rojas has already been slated to take over shortstop on a more than regular basis. He'll get some off days here or there, but definitely hitting more often than just against one side of the handedness of pitchers. What are your thoughts overall on this situation, Kevin? And because of the added playing time, are you even more so, like, if he wasn't picked up last weekend, are you more so targeting Rojas due to this situation he finds himself in now?
Yes, I think that for the most part, he will be the shortstop for the foreseeable future. Obviously, that would change if they made a move and brought somebody in from outside the organization. But I think with who they have rostered, he's probably the guy. And they have others. They called Miguel Vargas back up, and so they've had 3 games versus left-handed starters in the last 4 days. So we've seen Vargas, we've seen Rojas. We would have seen Rojas anyway, probably somewhere. 1 out of 2 games versus right-handed starting pitching over their last 5 games, and he played one of them, not both. Kike Hernandez, I believe, was started at shortstop the other one, and we'll probably see that once in a while. So it's not every day, but I think it does solidify the short side of the platoon and increase the days that he will play versus right-handed pitching over, the next 6 to 8 weeks. I like Scott Ginstad likes to say, always go to the longer end of that. It was kind of nice hearing Scott Ginstad twice this week for those of us that listen to a lot of podcasts, not only his own with Jeff Erickson on Sunday night, going over Faab as it is just completed, but he was a guest on FTN with Vlad Sedler and Jason this weekend or this week. So got to hear him a couple times, and he really drives that home. Go to the longer end. So probably a couple of months we're looking at this situation, unless once again they bring somebody in from the outside. I think this lineup, Rojas. We've seen moderate power. We've even seen double-digit home runs when he's had over 500 plate appearances in a season, and more than a handful of stolen bases in this lineup. Even though he's hitting in about the 7 spot most days, it appears so far. He's going to rack up some counting stats, especially the runs and RBIs with his handful of home runs and stolen bases. And yeah, he did perform for us in the Colorado series that some of us picked him up for last weekend to use the first half of this week. But now he's probably a hold in those leagues, and worth taking a look at in leagues where he's available.
I mean, yeah, he's been batting at the bottom of the order, but not the last 2 days. Moved up
Right.
one spot every day. Now batting fifth on Friday. Granted, these are against the lefties. This is where you expected to see him, produce, whether or not he was filling in on a regular playing time anyway. But it's still nice to see that he's producing enough to show that he should be moving up the order, at least in special situations. Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's had his moments in the sun, in the spotlight, and he's obviously taking advantage of that right now as well. The Dodgers are going to play nice with Mookie Betts' return. I do not expect him to be on the short side of that time frame for all the reasons you mentioned, the way that Scott Jensen always talks about it, but just the fact that the Dodgers are, I have a feeling that regardless of all these injuries, they're still going to feel somewhat comfortable in their division, in their playoff race chances by the time he's getting closer to that 6-week period. So obviously, they're not going to if they do find themselves in that positive situation in the standings, there's not going to be much reason for them to shove him back in there before he's ready. Plus, they don't have the luxury of putting him in as DH on the Dodgers. So you don't have that luxury with LA to kind of ease somebody back into the lineup just to get their bat in the lineup. Plus, it's his hand. He's not swinging a bat unless that thing is ready to go. All right, so let's go. We'll move from one injury to a debut here, where the Astros have another pitcher debuting from. He started on Friday. That is starting pitcher Jake Bloss. They called him up to debut as we're recording this on Friday. He debuted earlier today. Unfortunately, he left a little early. Left in the fourth inning, or after the fourth inning, with what the Astros are calling shoulder discomfort, which is just the nicest possible way you could probably phrase that. Hopefully, that's all it actually is for his sake, but obviously not something you want to remember. Was Bloss somebody you were interested in before this apparent injury based on what you saw? Or, I mean, the conversation can just end right here because I think it's pretty obvious where our interest level is in far as Faab goes. But if Bloss is actually hurt, do the Astros have anybody else that they can just continue to pull back in? Or are they going to have to continue to kind of shuffle through what they've got at the major league level?
I think they're still shuffling until uh, Justin Verlander's neck feels okay. And it seems like he could be back relatively soon, but until then, they're going to have to keep mixing and matching. I don't see anybody here because they've been going through this all year.
Yeah.
Bloss is like the 15th starting pitcher we've seen from Houston this season. So, yeah, they really need Justin Verlander back. They really need Justin Verlander to be close to what we could expect from a 41-year-old Justin Verlander. They need him to pretty much be as good as he can be at this stage of his career. As far as Bloss, I was intrigued, and I was waiting for tonight's SP roundup because that's what Nick Pollock told me to do. on his starting pitcher Faab podcast here on Friday. He said, "I don't know yet. We got to wait till we see him." So I was waiting, and now the waiting is over, and we didn't have to wait as long. We know we're not going to be interested this weekend.
Yeah, they really have nothing left. I don't know if Bloss was
Yeah,
on the 40 man before this or not, but you go back through their depth chart in their minor leagues, there's only one guy at AAA, one pitcher at AAA who's on the 40 man roster, and it's JP France, who's also injured. And so I mean, they've got Eric Lauer back down there. They've got a couple other names, but none of them are on the 40 man. So obviously they'd have to make some other kind of an adjustment to free up the roster space and start somebody else's clock a little bit early. And I mean,
I
yeah.
I agree completely with Uncle Ted in the chat, joining us live here on YouTube. Yeah, they have to make a move, and maybe sooner now. We're only a little over a month from the trade deadline, and we'll start to see moves here in the next week or two. Houston going after a starting pitcher might be one of the first we see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who's available. And there's a couple teams we're going to talk about, Kyle Bradish going down and actually succumbing to Tommy John surgery. The Orioles are always in, at least from a fan perspective or from our perspective, the Orioles are always in the mix for another starting pitcher. They finally made the move, obviously, this offseason with Burns, but didn't do anything at the deadline last year. So we'll see if they're actually active. It'll be interesting to see who's actually available and what people are willing to give up based on obvious needs for, like the Astros have at the moment. And we don't foresee that kind of changing, even with Verlander coming back. I mean, they're still very tight on options. All right, let's move along to an injury that never actually was, and that was CJ Abrams. I put this in the news in the notes here because he was scratched from Wednesday's game and he had to get an MRI on his left wrist. I'm like, oh, all right, we got to watch this, see what's happening here. And of course, he's back in the lineup today, and I'm like, all right, I'm just going to leave this in the notes anyway, Kevin. But we got a great conversation about just noticing what's going on with Abrams lately. Talk to me about the observations that you made here with Abrams, because he was back in the lineup, but the question was he actually being productive enough to take notice?
He's been very productive over the last couple of weeks, except in the category that we hope is his number one category for us, and including this start on Friday evening. He does have a stolen base. He's also been caught. He's now been caught 7 times in 18 attempts. Horrible, absolutely horrible success rate. Prior to tonight, he had a couple of stolen bases. It was over a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago. He had 2 in 3 games. Prior to that, so he's had 2 stolen bases since May 4th. That's over 6 weeks. 2 stolen bases. He's been caught 2, 3, 4, 5 times now. He's 2 stolen bases and 5 caught stealings since the beginning of May. That is a concern. Now he's on like an 11-game hit streak. He's got doubles, a couple home runs in there. He's being very productive, but this is kind of my issue with just looking, especially in draft season, but also in season when we're looking at rest of season projections and we're looking at auction calculator dollar amounts. CJ Abrams is going to have a nice dollar amount projection. Sure. I would assume this is great production, but what that dollar amount doesn't tell us is the category we are looking for from him. He's been absolutely horrible for almost 2 months now. So be careful in what we're expecting out of CJ Abrams. Hopefully your roster is flexible enough because he's not available anywhere.
No, of course.
Hopefully, where if you have him rostered, your roster's flexible enough that you could reap the rewards of the runs scored, the RBI, the great batting average he's been giving us recently. But hopefully, you're getting your stolen bases somewhere else because they're not coming from him. And if this keeps up much longer, it might already be too late, even. He's going to get a red light.
I wonder, like, yeah, where the line is though for him to either not only get a red light but actually start losing playing time. Like you said, he's already at the bottom of the lineup. That adjustment has already been made for a little bit of time. And so I guess I wonder what's going to take the Nationals at this point to actually start cutting into that playing time, whether or not it's based on how much they're actually sending him on the base pass and actually giving him giving somebody else more opportunity to see what they can do as well. But I don't foresee that happening, at least not the playing time. But there's no reason to keep him running so he can possibly, knock on wood, get truly injured if he's just not going to be successful doing it anyway, right? So keep an eye on that. All right.
As someone with a lot of Jacob Young shares, we could swap them in the lineup. That'd be great.
There you go. There you go. Speak it into existence, Kevin.
Work on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got some returns, we got some other injuries to talk about, and we're going to talk about those right after this quick break. All right, I promised I would talk about an actual return. Unfortunately, it is handcuffed to another IL stint. They literally were corresponding moves here. Bobby Miller returns for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Fortunately, it's due to the fact that Walker Buehler took his place on the IL as well. But I really want to talk to you about, or I want to get your thoughts on here, Kevin, is that the Dodgers also called back up Landon Knack to start on Friday. Did not leave his start injured, knock on wood, like Jake Bloss did. Not his MLB debut per se, but still, started the game here. Do you foresee Knack sticking in this rotation for the Dodgers, assuming the Dodgers need some added help themselves to kind of rotate through these injuries or these potential injuries that they might be dealing with in the rotation? What are your overall thoughts on Knack moving forward, at least this weekend for Faab?
Yeah, I think he probably is fairly cemented in this rotation for right now. The Dodgers had a lot of depth. We've seen several of these players this season, most of them not as much as we had hoped, right? Not only the most recent issue with Walker Buehler, it was recently that we saw the injury to Yamamoto. Emmett Sheehan injured early. He was already a beneficiary of some of the injuries that the Dodgers have. I'm not so sure right now of all the guys listed on the IL as far as pitchers for the Dodgers. Clayton Kershaw might not be the first one we see pitch for the Dodgers. And I was fairly certain we wouldn't see him pitch this season. And from all reports, he's throwing 88 right now in his workouts. So they need Landon Knack to be good. Their game is just getting started on Friday evening as we are recording right now. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on Friday evening and take into consideration on Sunday. But it really does appear that Landon Knack is going to be in the rotation for the foreseeable future for the Dodgers. And, you know, we'll see Gavin Stone back as well. Roster resource, because of the off day on Thursday, has Paxton, Miller, Stone, Glasnow right back to Paxton next week. If we see Landon Knack pitch well, it's against the Angels, so hopefully he can handle them. We may get to see him at San Francisco next weekend. He may get skipped, so it's going to be hard to put him in our lineup on Monday, we're going to have to really pay attention. Hope we get news over the next couple of days after his performance this evening, because they do have the luxury of skipping their fifth starter if they would like to this week. I don't think they want to. The Dodgers have been a team in recent years that are more likely to go to a six-man rotation
Right.
than skip a guy because of an off day. So I think as long as he performs decent to well this evening, I would expect to see him at San Francisco next weekend. I'd be a lot more comfortable if we hear that from the Dodgers before I lock him in my lineup on Monday.
Yeah, I agree though. In general, this is like having those off days next week is the equivalent of having that six-man rotation. You don't necessarily have to skip somebody per se. You just want to give them a little bit of extra rest. You just want to give them an extra day, maybe an extra 2 days, depending on how much how concerned you are with their arm or with their workload. But Bob
Well,
Miller's
coming
just
into the
coming back from
season,
his injury.
wasn't it the Dodgers that said they wanted their starters to pitch every sixth day, not necessarily a
A six-man
strict
rotation
six-man
is yeah.
rotation, but they wanted 5 days off?
Yeah.
So in
Just
that
for that.
case, we probably wouldn't see him this week if that's the way they want to do it, unfortunately. But going forward, uh, it appears he's going to be in this rotation as long as he performs halfway decently for quite some time.
Yeah. All right. Well, we got another return we're expecting, and there's not much to say here except the fact that if you've been stashing Max Scherzer, maybe you're excited. I guess Kevin, have you been stashing Max Scherzer anywhere? Are you starting him on Sunday in those daily moves where you have the choice? Or is this, as Nick Pollock would call it, a clear still ill for you? And if he doesn't start on Sunday and they move him back to like Monday, Tuesday, are you starting him in your weekly lineup sets?
So I did stash him in a couple of spots, not for the whole season. He was somebody I was picking up, 2-3 weeks ago when we started hearing that I had picked him up before he had the thumb issue. So I did stash him for longer than I had wanted to originally, but I picked him up when it looked like we were going to see him in a couple of weeks, and it's been more like 4 or 5 weeks now. Um, I did not start him this week in the spots where I did stash him. Uh, he's facing the Kansas City Royals, man.
Yeah.
You don't want to throw somebody out there against that their first time back. No, it's more to be with his first time back. I don't see him going 5 innings. I really don't. I know the older veterans can really surprise us sometimes and come out and throw 6-7 innings when they first come back. They're the veterans. They know what their arm feels like and they can do it. I just didn't really trust it. Next week, if he does pitch Saturday or Sunday, then he's going to pitch at Baltimore next weekend. So now we're talking about, is it because he just came back or is it opponent? And
Yep.
so then we have that consideration to take into effect. Um, as good as Baltimore's lineup is, I think as long as he gets through an outing this weekend, fairly healthy, uh, decent velocity, probably not right where he was at his peak last season, but close to it. If he looks healthy and comfortable, the way things are right now, I'd have a hard time finding 6 or even 5 starting pitchers on my teams better than Max Scherzer,
So
even at Baltimore.
it'd be a no-brainer. If he does, Russell Resource has him suggested he'll start on Monday. Obviously, there was some news that came out recently that announcing that he'll probably start on Saturday, Sunday. But if it does get pushed to Monday, they've got Texas has 7 games next week. As you mentioned, they'll be at Milwaukee and they'll be at Baltimore. He'll almost guaranteed still to get the 2 starts. So that's if he's starting on Monday, based on what you're saying, you're starting him for sure in those weekly formats.
Wow. Well, I wasn't going to start him. I didn't start him, thinking his first start back would be this weekend at Milwaukee. I was joking about my Royals out Milwaukee. In my mind, is a tougher matchup than
And
Kansas
that's his
City and
first one.
Texas.
Sure.
So that would be his first start. I'm pretty hesitant. That might be enough to get me away from that at Baltimore for the second one, even. Yeah, and I had roster resource pulled up as well, and had opened it today, and it still had him as Saturday. But based on what you said, I just refreshed it. So
Yeah.
this is very recent, a very recent change, uh, due to something the team has said. Evidently, that Jason has made here on roster resource. So, yeah, Ah, I would try not to start him. Yeah, I might have him on rosters where that two-step is better than my other options,
Sure.
but I'd probably try to leave him on the bench for that two start.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the volume is always going to be tempting, regardless of how you're coming
Yeah,
back. But
absolutely. I was going to add that too, because this is one of those things that when I'm setting my lineup on Monday, I might do exactly the opposite of what I just told you.
so there you go.
It's close. It's really close. That's what.
Well, one return that we won't be seeing this year. Speaking of the Brewers, so well done by us on this segue here. Robert Gasser, he has announced he's having Tommy John surgery. But Jacob Junis rejoins the team, and at the time where I was looking at this, there was not a known role for him. I don't know if you've seen anything since, but what are your thoughts on the Milwaukee rotation and what we might expect to see with Gasser not being an option, for at least for the rest of the season?
So I expected to see Jacob Junis start a game this week. I was under the impression that that was the plan that the Brewers had, and I don't remember exactly how I came up with that, whether they had specifically said it or if I heard someone speculating on it somewhere. But I picked up Jacob Junis last week to use this week. He has not been activated from the IL yet. It does not appear, unless they did activate him on Friday, which is possible, but he was still on the IL as of Thursday night's game. Uh, Roster Resource has him going into the bullpen as their long reliever. We've seen this with Jacob Junis in multiple locations in the past, being used as an opener or as a follower, so that long relief guy is used on a regular basis. I think that might be in the cards here. Of course, due to the chasing wins, we would prefer him be the follower in that situation. Um, I'm intrigued here because of what the Brewers rotation looks like right now. I mean, it's Freddie Peralta and a bunch of other guys.
And then some.
So if Jacob Junis is really going to be the long reliever, there could be a lot of value here. Bryce Wilson, Colin Ray, Carlos Rodriguez, Tobias Myers. That these are all guys we could see Junis come in before the end of the fifth inning. That would be ideal. And so I'm holding him where I did grab him, maybe grabbing him in another spot or two, where I have the room and don't have a lot of needs. Because this situation could work out well for us as fantasy players, even if he's not in the rotation.
Yeah, it's just a matter of monitoring usage, like you said.
Mhm.
And if he is going to be the first man up, long man doesn't necessarily mean you're the first man up. It just means you're going to eat a bulk of the innings. So, have a starter. Also, the reason you come in to, in the fourth inning isn't always just because the first pitcher wasn't slotted to go just 3 or 4 innings. They got blown up or
Right.
injured or not putting themselves in a situation where they can actually get the win. This is obviously the other side of the coin when you're trying to chase these vulture wins is with those first man up. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're the first man up in a good spot. So obviously you got to trust the team is going to put them in a situation to succeed. It's not always the case. But if Junis can succeed at the very least in those ratio categories in a 3 inning spurt here or there, or even 4 innings, if you can really stretch it out, great. That can still be very, very much so useful, and hopefully he backs his way into a win here or there. All right, so we got some interesting topic to kind of pick your brain about here. We talked already about Robert Gasser going to have Tommy John surgery. We've talked about a lot of different TJs that have been happening throughout the into spring training and into the regular season as well. Kyle Bradish is the newest one to finally kind of bite the bullet here and actually go under the knife after trying to come back after spring training as well. Before we get into the crux of that, obviously, they're going to be without Bradish throughout the rest of this year and most of next year as well. That is in Baltimore. We talked about how Houston is beat up and they'll be going after a starter. Does this solidify the idea that Baltimore will also be going after a starter at the deadline, which is quickly approaching, by the way? It's just over a month away. So we're going to see some action happening leading up and probably right after the All-Star break. How long does Baltimore wait, and do they actually make a move as well?
I think they're going to make a move, and I don't think it has. I mean, as well as the Yankees are playing, Baltimore may or may not win the division, but they're counting on being in the postseason. And so right now in their starting rotation, you have Corbin Burns and Grayson Rodriguez. And then what are we doing in game 3? I think they're fine right now with Albert Suarez, Cade Povich, and Cole Irvin. For the regular season, they have that good of a team, that good of a lineup as well behind them. But in the postseason, I think they're going to want a more reliable starter in that third spot. So I definitely think they will make a move. I don't think it's imminent. You're 100% correct. The trade deadline is rapidly approaching, but I don't think we necessarily have to see them do something in the next week or two. I think they're fine with what they have as a starting rotation for the next month, but I do definitely see them making a move based on their postseason aspirations.
Yeah, I wonder who's actually going to be out there and available. I mean,
Nobody in the National League.
yeah,
I don't know.
everybody's
I
500.
haven't looked. Everybody except the Rockies
Rockies.
and the Marlins were within 2 games of a postseason appearance a couple days ago. I don't know if it's still
Oh,
that way, but it can't be too much different. It's only been a couple of days. So yeah, that's going to limit the number of sellers at the deadline if everybody thinks they have a chance.
yeah, and even just looking at the National League, if those are the only teams selling, obviously only one of those two teams has anything of value, at least from their rotation that you're probably interested in. Obviously, maybe as a fourth starter or as a bullpen piece, you could reclaim somebody from the Rockies and kind of make that argument. And obviously, I don't want to say obviously, but one of the biggest trade pieces that the Marlins probably have is currently dealing with his own injury set, and obviously I'm talking about Jesus Luzardo. And so yeah, that kind of boom definitely isn't imminent. And it's going to be, it's always more difficult to trade within your division, even if you are competing and your trade partner is not competing. So you lose a third of that division as well, a third of the league to pair up with, on the surface at least. So yeah, I also agree. I don't think that there'll be anything imminent. They can scrape by at least for the next month and a half. But we'll be seeing a move from them to clear up that number 3 spot and then move forward toward the playoffs with that situation. Garrett Crochet is the name that kind of is ringing around right now, just because of the fact that he's not going to be the pitcher for the White Sox on their quote next good team. He has a couple years left of control, and the Orioles, if you haven't noticed, have some pretty good bats that they could dangle for an extra for not a non-true rental. So I don't know, like, and obviously they're the White Sox not in the division, not competing, obviously with the Orioles not competing for a playoff spot. Does that seem like the type of player that makes sense as their number three going into the playoffs, or are you foreseeing them wanting to get a more veteran presence with playoff experience, for that matter?
It's not the veteran presence. It's not the playoff experience. It's Garrett Crochet in his professional career has thrown 6 innings in a season, 54 innings in a season, didn't play in 2020 or 2022. He's thrown 25 innings in a season last year. This season, he's already over 88 innings. I think 120 really is the limit here. And definitely if he's still with the White Sox. Another team might, if they think his arm feels okay, and
Sure.
he 25 years old, little couple of years of control left. I think even anybody that would trade for him is probably going to be careful. The only way I think I make this move if I'm Baltimore is trading for him right now, moving him to the bullpen, and then stretching him out again towards the end of the season. Because I just don't see any way that he can be a starter the rest of the way and into the postseason when a little over 50 innings is the most in his professional career, that we're in this fifth season now.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I think there's definitely something to be said though about if you want that third starter in the going to go deep in the playoffs, or actually, make it past the first round of the playoffs. You want somebody who can, has the experience in doing so as well. And those are the players that I'm worried aren't going to be available at the deadline from the right, from the right situation. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. There are a bunch of guys that are slated to come back off the IL after having Tommy John surgery. And we're going to talk about them right after this break. All right, Kevin. I'm gonna lead us off with your favorite player, and a
Mhm.
list of all a bunch of players I know that you're super excited about. And these are all guys that are coming off of major surgeries, most of which Tommy John surgery last year, and they're either they're currently in their rehab stints, or doing bullpen sessions, or working their way back. I've got 4 names here specifically, and I just want to know where we're at with them. As far as we all know that you can't trust guys coming back from Tommy John right away, but these are not just like names of random players. These were guys that were all studs at one point or another. They all had their spotlight. We all see what the ceiling. We've all seen what the ceiling is or has been for them at one point or another. They're all going to be rostered at some point. Question is, are they going to be rostered by you, and how early are you willing to stash them ahead of time? And like I said, I'm going to start off with I know your favorite player here, that's also the one who's slated to return the earliest of this bunch, and that is Robbie Ray of now the San Francisco Giants. Has not made his Giants debut yet, traded from Seattle in the offseason, as he continues to recover from his Tommy John surgery. Been throwing, I think he's thrown 3 games in the Arizona uh, in their in the complex league, excuse me, the Arizona
Yep.
complex league. First 2 went really, really well. Third one, overall, his stuff was there. He got hit around a little bit, but all the reports that came back is that he still looked pretty good. How dare I ask, are you excited about Robbie Ray returning? Are you stashing him anywhere? Are you willing to, pull him in through Fab in that wild card section of our recommendations? What are your overall thoughts on Robbie Ray returning and then also debuting for the Giants the rest of the season, probably right after, if not during the All-Star break?
Yeah, that's the key. We're getting close. If you do want to pursue Robbie Ray, and once again, like I said earlier, you have the room and your team's relatively healthy. You have a stash spot, or you want to upgrade a stash spot. I like you said, that was his third appearance in the complex league. His first two appearances, he gave up 8 runs, only allowing one base runner over a combined 3 innings. Went 1 2/3. This most recent one gave up 4 runs, still had some strikeouts. So he's only thrown 4 2/3 innings in 3 appearances,
Sure.
but he's got double-digit strikeouts in those 4+ innings. Right? We know that's Robbie Ray's strength. My aversion to Robbie Ray over the past couple of seasons has been his draft cost, uh, entirely way too high for me. But when we're talking about a guy that's going to be available in Fab, and if we go grab him this weekend or maybe even next weekend, probably still relatively close to zero of my Fab dollars. This is somebody I'm interested, especially pitching his home games in San Francisco. So yeah, this is a guy that if you have the room, if some starting pitching will help your roster, which I don't know any that's not the case, especially now. Some of us were just cruising with our starting pitching, but the weather got hot. There, some people like to reference the balls changed on June 1st, but I think it's the weather for the most part, and because I think the ball. Uh, I I I I really bought into what Jason Collette had been saying about the ball, that it wasn't the manufacturing of the ball this season, that it had to do with how they were mandating everybody use the humidors. And if everybody's using the humidors the same all season long, if they said this is how we're going to use them this season, when the weather's cold, those are dead balls. The humidors to limit them a little bit when the weather's hot and humid. Now that it is hot and humid, they're just doing their desired effect,
Right.
not going too far. So that's kind of where I'm at. So, yeah, a starting pitcher in San Francisco with some of our other pitchers that have been performing well in spite of not so great underlying numbers. I would welcome Robbie Ray to my team to take the place of one of those guys.
Yeah, you probably should have done this beforehand, but I'm also curious to see what the Giants' schedule is in the second half, how many opportunities he might have to pitch in Colorado, how many times he might be facing the Dodgers. And we all know that the schedule is not weighted as heavily as it once was, but it still does favor your division opponents. You still play them a little bit more than everybody else. So that'd be something interesting to think about, especially in those head-to-head leagues where you have to look at what that schedule is going to be in September. If you are stashing him, who he might actually be facing come your playoff time. Texas is expecting 2 returnees to their rotation after they're expecting Max Scherzer this weekend, if not Monday. But then in a few weeks time, if not 2 or 3 months time, they should be getting back both Tyler Mahle and Jacob DeGrom, who are both coming back from Tommy John's respectively. Mahle already done a couple BP sessions, 30-40 pitches in each. Obviously feeling good or at least saying all the right things. The Rangers are expecting him back in late July, or by the end of the month at least. So much more post All-Star break than we are seeing Robbie Ray, who would be more expected to be back in mid-month. Let's start with Mahle. Jacob DeGrom is a special case because of all of his injury history and all of his production. Mahle is somebody who I think a lot of people could either give or take based on the weather, or based on their feelings of that day. What are your overall thoughts on Mahle coming back for the Rangers? And can he hit the ground running or do you expect more bumps in the road?
Yeah, I was really excited about Male 2 or 3 years ago, like a lot of people were. Injuries have been the reason, but it hasn't been consistent. He's shown us flashes, and at other times, even when we thought he was relatively healthy, he just hasn't performed well. But I think it's due to all of the injuries. He hasn't had a consistent go out there every fifth day for very long since he's broken into the majors. So I don't have a lot of interest until we see it. I am a That's one of the phrases that I dislike the most in fantasy baseball, because if you wait until you see it,
It's too late.
that it's either really expensive or too late. However, I that's where I'm at with Male, unfortunately, as big a hopes as I had for him earlier. Jacob DeGrom, completely different. We know Jacob DeGrom. We know what he can do when he's healthy. And Adam, with the so-called Tommy John honeymoon, where elbows are
Yep.
stronger for 3 to
300 innings
4
or so. Yeah,
years,
yeah.
we're told. Jacob DeGrom is 36 years old,
He
coming
does
off this
have
Tommy John.
4 more
He
years.
made, people have talked about over the last couple of years, as he was avoided Tommy John, but had all these other injuries, that he needs to dial it back a little bit to stay healthy. I think Jacob DeGrom is going to come out and just let it rip for as long as he can, and the next time something happens, hang him up. So we we could see like peak Jacob DeGrom even at 36 years old.
That's fair. That's actually that's a completely fair assessment here. You got to put all those things into account as you're thinking about this, and yeah, totally
I
could
have
see that
stashed
being.
DeGrom all season long in an NFBC league. That's how good I think he can be when he comes back.
There it is. There it is. That's worth the roster spot. I stashed him in one league, but it's a league that has IL slots. And he was on the waiver wire. I mean, he was on, he's a free agent. So I'm like, yeah, cool. I've got a couple of IL spots. I'll take them.
Of
And
course.
I'll be okay with that. Um, the last one here that I think is just an interesting name because of the team he's currently on, that he's rostered on, what could happen at the trade deadline, who he is. I'm talking about Liam Hendricks, who is with the Boston Red Sox, hoping to return from his Tommy John surgery maybe end of August, maybe September. The rumors had been swirling literally since spring training that Kenley Jansen would be on the trade block and in his final year of his contract with the Red Sox, and there would be an obvious opening to close out games, no matter how good or bad the Red Sox are performing or are continuing to perform by the time we hit that time. Is this just you're rooting for the guy because baseball is better with Liam Hendricks in it, or can he actually be useful in at the end of the season as you're trying to scrape some saves off the bottom of the barrel?
I think that's a possibility, but not enough of one to act on it at this point. Yeah, I think we're just all rooting for Liam Hendricks. And if he does make it back this season and does make his way to a ninth inning role right away, then those that have Faab left will reap the rewards, because I don't think a lot of people will stash Liam Hendricks. I think most have similar opinions to me. We're rooting for him, but there's just too much unknown there.
Yeah, I mean, not only unknown that whether or not he comes back at all, but whether or not the Red Sox are willing to put him into that situation from the get
Right.
go. And honestly, if he comes back at all, it'll just be you can ring the bell, you can be excited, and it's great just to see him back on the mound. I believe he is on it's either a 2 year or it was like a 1 year plus a team option for the second year. So, more than likely he'll be closing out games for the Red Sox next year, assuming everything goes well. So, something to look forward to next year. Or if you're in a keeper league or a dynasty league, feel free to stash them now at a low cost and reap the rewards in 2025. Knock on wood, hopefully. because I may or may not be one of those people that have already done that in those types of leagues. All right, moving on. Kevin, we gotta actually make some recommendations here for guys that we are I mean, actually, let me rewind. Did I miss anybody? Like, is there anybody out there that you are got your eye on as far as returning from injury? Doesn't have to be Tommy John. I guess these are all the guys we talked about just now were Tommy John, but is there anybody else? And usually these are guys that you talk about in the wild card section. I get it, so I'm not trying to steal that section as thunder. But is there another? I guess these are all pitchers as well. But is there a hitter or a pitcher that you're excited to see come back from injury at sometime around the All-Star break that can actually make a difference?
Yeah, it's not Tommy John, and we've talked about him a couple of times this season, but I've been stashing Devin Williams in spots for quite some time. The news hasn't changed. In fact, there hasn't been any new news since he started throwing. I'm taking that once again. No news is good news. He's right at 3/4, 77 and 78% rostered in 15 and 12 team NFBC leagues. When I'm using the main event as my 15 team leagues and $350 RotoWire online championships as my 12 team leagues, right? Same rostership. So available in about a quarter of 12 and 15 team leagues out there. I would guess a little more available in shallower leagues. When Lou was here, and Devin Williams came up then as well a couple of weeks ago. Same discussion that you and I have had multiple times this season about Devin Williams. And Lou said, so does this mean you're trying to sell high on Trevor McGill at this point? And I said, I think so. With each passing week, the closer it gets to Devin Williams coming back, the less you're going to get for McGill. Well, McGill has performed so well recently that the Brewers are going to have the luxury, as they also have a huge lead in the NL Central. So they're going to have the luxury of really easing Devin Williams back in. And that could be a good thing for his performance as well. It just may mean a couple less saves in the second half for him. I don't think McGill is going to keep Williams from taking the job back, but it may prolong it a little longer. But I'm still stashing Williams. I still think he does eventually take the ninth inning back by design, just that they may let it take a little longer when he first comes back than what they may have needed from him if things were going differently. But yeah, with their division league, with McGill performing so well, we might not see Williams back in the role. But even if he gets the role back by August 1st, that's 2 full months of Devin Williams. So that could be a good 15 saves and great ratios on teams where you need a closer.
Yeah, I mean, you stole the question in a different way that I would have asked, and that was about Trevor McGill. What do you do with Trevor McGill? How long do you hold on to him? And my points were going to be very similar. Just
Until
you
Williams
don't.
does take the job
But even
in
then,
non-trade leagues. In a trade
yeah.
league, I might see what I could get for him
Oh,
now.
sure. And especially in a head-to-head league where again, if you're playing for those playoffs, you got to know what these guys are going to be doing in September. And I mean, if you're in a league where people are not aware of that situation, sure, try to take advantage of that. But you're also need to probably find other league mates that pay a little bit more attention to baseball. That being
Or
said,
maybe somebody's desperate for the saves they can get for the next 4 to 5 weeks.
Uncle Ted over there, over on YouTube, made a great comment. Just a hitter to keep an eye on. Obviously, Tristan Casas, somebody I am waiting around with bated breath to come back and take back over first base for the Red Sox. That is a bat that can make a difference, assuming that he comes back, at 100% and they're not forcing him back. Red Sox even further back than other teams that we've talked about, though in third place in the American League East. Let's just say that they are above Toronto in Tampa Bay. I don't know if that's saying much, but still 10 games back from the Orioles and the Yankees at the time of this recording. That's how I tried to start the show off. And I wanted to, make sure everybody's aware I get to go to a actual major league game this weekend. This is my Father's Day present. So that's nice. Get to make the 90-minute drive over to Cincinnati and check off another ballpark off my list. I got to go. It will be my second game of the year. I went to the Twins opening day game. Only, unfortunately, I am embarrassed to say this, I only stayed for 3 innings because I had work to do. I was only in Minneapolis for work reasons. So I really kind of played hooky. I kind of snuck away. So I was happy for that. But I got that ballpark off my bucket list. I'm getting Great America's Small Park off my bucket list on Sunday. So that'll be fun because even though there are no major league teams in Indianapolis, there are so many teams within like a 4-hour drive of Indianapolis that I've been able to hit so many ballparks in my time here, more so than any of the 9 years I lived in the Bay Area. And obviously, there's only 2 teams out there. It'll be nice because
Well,
my whole list too is like I think it's about 40% of my ballpark list is made up of stadiums that no longer house major league teams, including like RFK Stadium in DC, Olympic Stadium in Montreal, the old Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium. Soon I'll add the Coliseum in Oakland to that list. So it's nice to be able to get some more stadiums in there that are actually housing major league teams now.
yeah, that's very cool. And one guy we did not bring up in the news and notes section that you will see pitching for Cincinnati on Sunday, Carson Spires. You can let us all know on Twitter if we want to pick him up to use at St. Louis next weekend.
There we go. We'll get to him and anybody else that might fit the bill as far as recommendations for all these categories right after we take this quick break. All right, we are back. You are, of course, still listening or watching on The Wire. We are streaming back on YouTube once again. And of course, we're still on our Twitter at On The Wire Pod. We do record mostly on Friday nights this season, so keep an eye on that feed as they go out on Friday nights. And we talked a whole bunch of different news, things to expect, but of course, we didn't hit on everything. And as I usually say every week, you should be listening to the First Pitch podcast for all of that other information hosted by the great Casey Bubba and Jake Crumpler on the weekends. They break down all the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy leagues. And as Kevin alluded to earlier, Nick Pollock has his SP Faab forecast that comes out for PL Pro members only on the Pitcher List podcast network, where he goes through every single 2-start pitcher and the pitching Faab recommendations. Is a nice little supplement to our show as well. And then his daily podcast, of course, recapping all of the starts from the previous day and looking ahead at the next day's streamer options. And of course, that is the Plus Pitch podcast, available wherever you're listening to this podcast as well. But with all that said, Kevin, let's get into the Faab recommendations for the 14th run of Faab going into the 2024 season. We will go category by category as we always do. Give me somebody worth keeping an eye on if I need some power, home runs, RBIs, the good stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to start by answering a question from Uncle Ted here in the chat as we're recording live on YouTube. Are we breaking the bank for Orelvis Martinez? I love Orelvis Martinez. I don't necessarily love what I foresee the situation to be right now. That is, like many prospects that get called up, he sat for the first 2 days, and he is in the lineup Friday, but it is the first time in 3 games that he is in the lineup, and it's due to the facing all right-handed pitching so far. I think we will see him every time they face a left-handed starting pitcher and some righties, but we don't know how quickly he will start seeing more and more righties. But when we're talking about power, 28 home runs, 30 home runs, 28 home runs, 16 already this season. He's done it at every level. The power is definitely there. So yeah, it's and the strikeout rate, uh so far AAA this season, a little over 24%. He was near 27% at AAA last season, a little lower at AA. So projections have him in the mid to upper 20s, 27, 28% strikeout rate. If he can maintain that, then he's probably a 25 to 30 home run bat. So I have interest if he's getting the playing time. So far, it appears they're working him into that slowly, but I do believe he will become an everyday player. I just don't know how long they're going to take to ease him in here. The other prospect is a power guy that I have for this week, Ben Rice, uh, catcher eligible, playing first base for the Yankees in Anthony Rizzo's spot, has power as well, has really taken a step forward over the past season or two compared to what he had done. And the catcher eligibility, playing first base every day in the New York Yankees lineup, that's a no-brainer without even looking at a stat line.
Fair enough. There, I mean, that's all you need to know. Yeah, really, a lot of these decisions are all based around playing time, and as you alluded to with Orelvis Martinez, kind of taking the same path as a lot of these other prospect or hitting prospects specifically that have been coming up for various teams and then just not playing. Here's Kershaw obviously comes to mind as the forefront. Martinez's teammate Addison Barger came up earlier in the season, did not play very often, and then got sent back down rather quickly. He's back up as well, kind of in a very similar role to Martinez, but he's playing every day now. So there's at least there's that precedent with the Blue Jays saying like, hey, all right, put in your time. There will be another opportunity for Martinez, that is. And to your point, it may not be this week. It may not be the next week. It may not even be this stint in the majors, but maybe, somewhere down the line this summer, we'll start seeing more regular playing time. And I think it also really depends on the health of the rest of that infield. Obviously, with Bo Bichette going down for a bit, is what opened up the door at all for the roster spot in Martinez. And so we'll kind of see how that kind of irons itself out throughout the course of the summer.
I think it's really gonna it's really gonna come down to, you know, how much do they want the veteran presence of Isaiah Kiner Falefa at shortstop until Bo Bichette comes back? Or if Bo Bichette, according to a lot of rumors, may be on the move before the end of July. Because I think that's what we're seeing here. Falefa, as usual, performing okay. Not great, not fantastic, not fantasy relevant in most leagues. Sure, those runs and RBIs with a 270 average help a lot the deeper the league goes. But yeah, we'd be a lot more excited about rostering Orelvis Martinez in that spot.
Yeah, but Bichette still has what 2 more years on his current deal. Same thing. Him and Vladdy will be free agents at the same time. So it's almost one of those deals where if one of them goes, I think they probably both go, or neither one goes. So we'll see kind of what happens and where the Blue Jays feel like they're at the end of the season, because they still got these guys for at least through the 2025 season as well. That would obviously be a pretty big splash to make by anybody who's looking for a couple of bats. But we need some speed, Kevin. We need some runs. We need some stolen bases. What other bats are out there that can add to those categories this week, Fab?
Yeah, we've been kind of alluding to over the past few weeks that St. Louis's offense is uh, quite a bit better than it was last season, better than we anticipated it might be, in spite of the struggles of some of their aging superstars. The offense as a whole has been performing pretty well, and their everyday center fielder these days, at least versus righties, but even against the most recent lefty they faced, he was out there in center field. Michael Ciani, he's available almost everywhere. and he's stealing some bases for us. Um, the batting average is horrible. We're talking near 200, 209 at the moment, but 9 stolen bases in 68 games. So the stolen bases are there. St. Louis has a nice 7-game schedule coming up. I believe 5 of the 7 are scheduled to be versus right-handed starting pitchers. So I expect to see Siani in at least those 5, probably 6 of the games this week. And if it's stolen bases we're after, remember, he could hit our batting average a little bit. Uh, but I fully expect we get a stolen base or more out of Siani this week. Also, not as widely available. Definitely in 15-team leagues, he's only available in 1 or 2 main events. He's 98% rostered. However, Blake Perkins is available in almost 60% of the 12-team RotoWire online championship leagues, and he's got another 4 or 5 stolen bases over the last 2 weeks. He's been doing it all this season, getting quite a bit of playing time. I was actually a little surprised at how available he is in the 12 teamers. Not as big of a gap as I see sometimes between the main events and the OCs, when I bring up the gap in rostership percentage, but more so just surprised that he's available in so many 12-team leagues, but because I think his performance has warranted being rostered in those leagues, especially for some speed.
How dare you not bring up Austin Martin, because Uncle Ted cannot stop talking about Austin Martin. How much do you buy? I'm just gonna put you on the spot here, Kevin. How much are you buying into his recent production in Minnesota in this
I
category specifically?
Right. I don't know. I will say, I'll put it this way. I'm enough intrigued by it that I'm upset that I dropped him a couple of weeks ago
Sure.
in a league, because right before he started this recent surge. So yeah, I'm definitely intrigued by it. I just have a really hard time pinpointing exactly what Minnesota is going to do from week to week, because it seems like they changed their philosophy on us multiple times throughout the season.
Yeah, well, Minnesota is one of the very few teams that doesn't have a full 7-game work week ahead of them, so that's something to consider as well as we move
Half the
into.
league.
Yes, we move into the Opportunity League. I'm going to take a nice deep breath and list off all the teams here that have 7 games ahead of them leading into the next week, and start off, of course, with Baltimore, Toronto, the Chicago White Sox, Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, the Angels, Texas, Atlanta, Miami, Philadelphia, the Cubs, Cincinnati, St. Louis, and the San Francisco Giants. So yeah, half the league playing all 7 days. So you have your pick of the litter as far as volume plays go. 3 teams though still have 2 off days next week to kind of balance it out a little bit. Houston, the Mets, and Colorado are only going to play 5 games. They do have your typical Monday, Thursday off days though. Nobody has any weird off days throughout the course of the week, so that's nice. You don't have to work around that when considering your lineups. We always focus on Colorado and Cincinnati because their ballparks typically are ones that you can trust are going to influence your hitters and your pitchers for that matter. Colorado is away all week long, even though they only have 5 games. They're playing 2 in Houston, and then they're playing 3 in Chicago against the White Sox. Cincinnati is going to be home for half against Pittsburgh, and then they'll be on the road in St. Louis for the final 4, so to round out their 7-day work week as well. With all of that in mind, anything else you want to consider, Kevin, who's got a good opportunity ahead of themselves for this week worth putting into your lineup based on matchups, based on added playing time, whatever you're considering?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I brought up Donovan Solano in the spot, and I'm bringing him up here again because he treated us well for the couple of games that we do. San Diego was facing lefties, so we knew he would be in the starting lineup. They're facing Washington the first 3 games this coming week. Washington loaded with left-handed starters. Patrick Corbin, Mackenzie Gore, and DJ Hers will all face San Diego. I fully expect to see Solano in the lineup all 3 games the first half of the week for San Diego once again. Um, uh, Another one that I kind of I was really excited about this until I looked a little deeper, but I'm still intrigued. That if there's any player over the last couple of seasons that I've been more in on than most others, and it's treated me well. Ramon Urias. I brought him up a lot over the past couple of seasons. This season didn't start out very well. Recently, performing very well. For the month of June, he's hitting 333, 3 of his 4 home runs on the season. He's got hits in, I think, 14 of 16 games. He's playing really well and playing every day versus righties. And the Baltimore faces 6 out of 7 right-handed starting pitchers this week. However, when you look a little deeper, Westberg got a day off one of those starts Urias got, and Mateo was injured for a couple of days. So those 3 guys are all trying to get at bats in 2 spots. Now Urias, he is a right-handed hitter, but not only for this season, for his career has been a much better hitter versus right-handed pitching. And even Jason Martinez on roster resource as a right-handed hitter has him as a strong side platoon bat. My worry is we were seeing Jorge Mateo get more and more starts versus right-handed pitching over the past 2-3 weeks. And in fact, that's benefited a couple of my rosters. I've been using him as a middle infielder where I could. Now I don't know what to do, right? Because if Urias is going to get playing time, Mateo's losing it. If Urias doesn't get it, Mateo's probably still getting it. This is something I really want to watch over the weekend, see what they're doing with these 3 guys. I fully expect Westberg to get the most playing time of the 3. We probably only see both Urias and Mateo in the lineup on a rest day for Westberg. But I really want to take a closer look over this weekend. Based on recent performance, Ramon Urias probably deserves these starts versus right-handed pitchers going forward. They're probably still going to try to get a couple of them to Mateo as well. But I'm not as excited about it as I was when I saw the recent playing time, but it is still worth monitoring. And I think whoever is performing better may run with this job for Baltimore. And then they're going to mix it all up when they call Jackson Holiday and Keston Hierstead back up and get rid of both of these guys. But for now, Ramon Urias might be taking over Jorge Mateo's playing time.
Yeah, and I mean, and you don't know how many of those prospects are still going to be on the Orioles roster come the trade deadline, for that matter. Never mind
The big
healthy.
hope for me is guys like Mateo and Urias get moved to teams where they will play every day,
Sure.
so that they can bring the young guys up. Then we get the benefit of all of them.
There
Right?
we go. Best of both worlds. Found myself muted. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the joke that, hey, sorry, Wade Miley cannot be picked up in this situation, Kevin. When you're talking about players that you're going to be a little higher on than most have been over the course of the years. But we'll get into those pitcher options. Maybe you'll throw in a Wade Miley comment there. Probably not. Right after this break. All right, Kevin, wins and strikeouts as we hit these pitching categories. Always fun to listen to you rattle off the reasons and names that you are considering, at least in the volume section of the recommendations. So take your deep breath and tell me who I should be putting on my waterfall bids, who might actually be available in most of my leagues.
Yeah, as I've done for the past few weeks now, I'm gonna run through pretty quickly, almost at least on first glance, everybody I have any interest in at all that has some availability in 12-team leagues or deeper. It's not a very long list this week. So uh, I sometimes come up with another guy or two over the weekend, but at first glance, this is what I see from as we have talked all season long. Very slim pickings. Rocky Road for Spencer Arrighetti. I know Arrighetti has given up some runs over his past couple of outings. He had been really good before that. That's why he's more available than I even thought he was, even after those couple of rough starts. 79% rostered in mains, only 24% in 12-team online championships. So, yeah, um, Rocky Road, I know it's been a couple of rough outings, but even in those 12s, he could be a sixth starter for me. Seventh, I think I might be looking for a middle reliever, but it's close. So definitely Rocky Road, and they've been sporadically pretty good. That's the frustrating thing. They're as bad as we thought they would be overall, but every now and then, even on the road, they decide to throw up 12 runs. And so hopefully that's not against Arrighetti for those of us that roll him out this week. Two Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim players this week because they both get Oakland and Detroit. Oakland, much like Colorado, has surprised some people at times. They have been more the bad Oakland lineup recently that we expected, but they did it to my Royals this week. They will put up runs on occasion and doing it via the long ball, but they're not somebody we're scared of. In fact, they are someone we're still targeting. At least I am. And Detroit, after being the same way for the first month or so of the season, they're back to being their dreadful selves. Um, other than Riley Green. So uh, Oakland and Detroit for both Griffin Canning, who I believe Nick said, I don't think I'm giving away too much information for people that aren't PL Pro. In fact, this is a good incentive to go get PL Pro. Nick Pollock's starting pitcher Faab podcast every Friday. Griffin Canning, I believe, was his number one target for guys that would be available in Faab. Now he's 88% rostered in main events, only 6% in online championships. That number is going to skyrocket because this is a great two-step for 12-team leagues and a guy that's available in 94% of them. Tyler Anderson, much more rostered, but has the same setup. Oakland and Detroit. He's available in a couple of main events and about 25% of online championships. And it's interesting. Nick also does a starting lineup grid and then color codes it. Must start, probable start, questionable start, do not start. Right? He adds probable start. Nick often talks about the Yahoo leagues and such where we can move guys in and out more on the pitching side. So, but he has them listed as probable starts for both matchups, both of them. And so, in my mind, I think two probable starts equals an absolutely start, especially a guy that's only 6% rostered in 12-team leagues.
Right.
Two guys from Oakland as well pitching against Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And last time I targeted the Oakland pitchers, I think they were facing Detroit and Colorado, both in Oakland. And it didn't go well. It didn't go horribly, but I didn't get any wins from them that week. They didn't get blown up terribly. Just didn't get the wins that we were targeting there. But giving it a shot again, just the one game at the Angels, both Mitch Spence, who was widely available in 3/4 of 15-team leagues and 100% of 12-team, and Joey Estes is available in a little over a third of main events and 90% of 12-team leagues. So again, a couple of guys much more available in the 12-team leagues, but I'm more than comfortable throwing them out there in a 12 versus the Angels. Here's one that I hate to say this, but from time to time, even when it comes to pitching, I disagree with Nick Pollock. He's all about James Paxton this week. I think he called him a must start or, for his two-step, and it makes perfect sense on the surface. He gets the Chicago White Sox and the San Francisco Giants, and with the Dodger lineup behind him. And he hasn't been outstanding, but he hasn't been bad either. He's been pretty good for most starts, couple of bad ones here and there. So it makes perfect sense that this is the week for James Paxton. But I like to look over the past 3 or 4 weeks of how a team is performing as a team versus handedness of pitching. And the Chicago White Sox over the past 3+ weeks, like 4 scoring periods, including this one. So 3.5 weeks. 770 OPS and 116 WRC plus versus lefties. That's the Chicago White Sox. San Francisco Giants, 879 OPS and a 154 WRC plus versus lefties. Third best in baseball over that time span, which is almost a month. So I am and Nick did, of course, make the stipulation with it being James Paxton. We never know. It might not work out. He made a comment along those lines. I am leaning to the side that I don't think this is going to work out. So I'm avoiding that if I can. Of course, I probably have some 15-team leagues where James Paxton, even though I know how good those teams have been against lefties, is my best option, and I'll roll him out there and hope he has a good week. But I'm shying away where I can. I think this is a huge trap with James Paxton's two-step this week. And then one I added because I picked all of my pitchers prior to listening to Nick's podcast and looking at his grid. It's the way I always do it. I want to make my own decisions and then see what I missed or add to it. Or you know what I'm talking about here. But the only pitcher that he has listed as an auto or probable start that has availability, and we haven't already mentioned, and he's listed as a probable start. So he's got him in his second tier of starting pitchers for the week, is Cal Quantrill at the Chicago White Sox. We know Quantrill's been good away from Coors, even at times in Coors this season. He's not a guy I have ever trusted. He is a guy that I have seen and heard talked about over the past several weeks when he has good matchups. And it seems like for those that have been making that move, it's probably worked out. He's performed fairly well in many of his starts this season. He wasn't even on my radar, but when I saw Nick had him as a probable start, I added him because he's available in half of main events and over 90% of online championships. So, like I said last week, I know a lot of these guys are fairly heavily rostered, at least in the 15s. A lot of availability in 12s this week. So hopefully you can find from this group players available in your league, and hopefully we have picked the right matchups that do well for us this week.
It's not even a matter of availability. It's just a matter of choices and knowing that if you find the right matchups and you have multiple guys on this list or any list that you're working off of, knowing what order you want to put them in, that can really help save you the money, Faab dollars in general, by putting all of these guys on here, and just be happy with whoever you end up getting. Who knows, you might be valuing somebody a lot more than everybody else in your league, and you get your top guy regardless. But you should make sure you have a lot of backup options. So it's good that we have that you're able to list off all of these guys. You listed off like 8 or 9 guys, maybe 2 or 3 of them are available in your league. That's still 2 or 3. So keep an eye on it. All right. Well, list isn't usually as long for the ratio options, though. That's almost by design. Like, there are lots of options that kind of fit this mold. We talk about them every single week. It's more about
almost everybody we've talked about in this category is available
still,
and
yes,
that's the way to think of this. All of these guys, I try to come up with a new one each week to add to our list, but these are the guys like I'm going to let you say it because one of us says it every week.
Yeah, it all depends on when they pitched.
Yeah.
I got some. I grabbed. I've grabbed a couple different guys throughout the course of the season in my Glarf league, and I got in our little league chat. One of my, one of the players in that league was like, I cannot believe how all these relievers that are already being rostered in this league. You guys are ridiculous. And I'm like, oh, like two of them are me. It's just a matter of both speculative ads on closers to be, or close guys who can vulture their way into a closer situation, but more so it's exactly what we're about to talk about, is the guys who can chip away at those ratios when you don't have the starting pitchers that you trust, in the matchups that you trust as well. There's nobody available on the waiver wire that you want to spend any money on. You've got these guys on your bench ready to get put in. Maybe they're in your lineup multiple weeks in a row, doing a better job of helping than these terrible matchups or these terrible starting pitching productions that we're seeing throughout the course of the season. So who's the newest name that we can add to the list, and just keep these guys on your watch list at all times, and then put them in your waterfall bids when you are desperate to like get somebody into your roster to fill a open roster spot.
Yep, absolutely. I'm adding Tyler Holton from Detroit this week to the list. I didn't even realize that he had a 2.11 and ERA and sub one WHIP in 85 innings last season. Didn't even realize that.
Right.
And he got
Because
off
he's in
to a
Detroit.
rough start this season, but now he's right back at it. After over the past several weeks, he's on that same pace: 2 ERA, sub one WHIP, and the innings. Right, 85 innings is a lot for a reliever, right? So over a full season, that's averaging more like 3 innings a week rather than the two that we see out of most relievers when we're getting that 60 to 70 innings by the end of the season. So added bonus, 7-game week for Detroit. Yes, Philadelphia is coming to town 4-3. That's a little scary, but I don't take that into as much consideration for a reliever. I do take it into consideration, but I am with the 4 games, the second half of the week being versus the Angels, and with that 3-game series versus Philadelphia being in Detroit, that limits home runs, then I'm okay with it for this week as well. So he'll definitely be in my waterfalls.
Yeah, always just good to add another name to the list here in this ratio category. Again, as you prompted me to say it, I'll say it again. Depending on who pitches Saturday and Sunday, and who is lining themselves up to pitch more innings in the following week, that's how you do your hierarchy on those bids. All right, staying the relievers, we got to get some saves in there. I love the quote recommendation, and I will use that very liberally on what you have in here. I probably should have mentioned it in the news. I'll throw out there, Chad Green should be, at the top of everybody's list as an obvious pick. As Yimi Garcia goes down, Jordan Romano obviously still dealing, and Blue Jays have already flat out said Chad Green will be the closer for the time being for the Blue Jays. Hasn't gotten a save yet, but Blue Jays aren't actually very good right now. But a closer is a closer. Still readily available in 12 teamers. Already picked up in almost all of the main events, but maybe you're in that a main event where he's still available. Get ready to pay up a little bit for that in those situations. 34% rostered, I believe. Yeah, 34% rostered in those 12 teamers on the online championship side on the NFBC platform. So check to see if he's available there. But Kevin, who are you questioning you should be looking at to get some saves?
Yeah, there's a few situations that are less than it settled completely. We're still seeing Munoz used earlier in high leverage situations in Seattle. So Ryan Stanek, he was picked up in most spots, still available in a few. There's some unrest in Texas. We're not sure what the Rangers are doing. There's some speculation Jose Leclerc might be back in the picture soon. So there's a lot going on. But the biggest question for me, which could lead to an opportunity if we pick the right guy, is the Chicago Cubs. I really don't think they're going to do this with Hector Neris for much longer. And, throughout his career, there's been times when we thought he would be a great closer, and it's never worked out. It was typically injury and that knocked him down when he would finally get that chance. But this is a guy that for several years we would always get excited when we thought he was in a situation where he could become the closer, and it hasn't worked out. He's been a much better setup guy throughout his career than ninth inning guy. Maybe that's just completely random, or maybe there's something to it mentally. I don't know. But what I do know is the Cubs need somebody they can count on in the ninth inning. I know some believe Mark Leiter Jr. I think that's a nice spec. I could see them making that move. The setup guys most recently have been Tyson Miller and Drew Smiley. I could see that. It but I think, and I think a lot of people want to see Ben Brown in that role. Unfortunately, you know, Kyle Hendricks had been moved out of the rotation and now is back in because it's not just Ben Brown that's injured for the Cubs. Jordan Wicks went down as well. So I don't. They might want Ben Brown back into the starting rotation. It appears he could be back in a couple of weeks. I I think at some point they're going to give him the chance to close. The great thing about that is if they are using him as a starter, he's still got use for us on our fantasy squad. So anywhere Ben Brown was dropped, that's who I would grab. If you're completely speculating deep league, everybody with any use for saves at all, it seems, is rostered. I think Mark Leiter Jr. is the guy I'd take a shot on here. But the Cubs are really interesting to me. And it's all we have to do is follow Sarah Sanchez on Twitter. We know how bad that bullpen has been
Oh my
recently.
gosh. Yeah, that is I'm sorry, that is a sad follow, Sarah. At this time, and I mean that in the most positive way I could possibly mean that. Yeah, I mean,
Uncle Ted likes Tyson Miller. So
it just seems like also like, you know, Albert Alzolay goes down and it's like, all right, no, nobody else actually wanted this job. And
right.
they're just keeping it warm until Alzolay can come back, and then they can have every reason to just put him right back in there and see if he can succeed again. So, I'm not holding my breath for when he comes back. I'm just saying it seems like the Cubs bullpen is doing everything they can to make everybody want Alzolay to come back that much quicker. All right, it's my favorite category here, Kevin, to see who you got going on in the wild card section. These are our spec plays, our injured guys you are willing to stash in leagues where you're able to, those prospects that are coming up, or just some random guy that didn't fit into any of their categories. Who you got here for us in the wild card section to consider?
Yeah, that's where I went this week. A guy that really didn't fit into any other categories. And if I knew when he was coming back for certain, I'd have put him in power category. Michael Massey had his 6 home runs in about 4.5 weeks with the major league roster for the Kansas City Royals. He was performing very well, had back issues similar to what kept him out earlier in the season. That's where a lot of the uncertainty is coming from. He did get multiple injections in his back at the end of May and has been playing in rehab games for a couple of weeks now and has had his rehab moved up to AAA. But Kansas City has not made any indication at all of how many rehab games they want to see out of him. Fortunately, we haven't heard any of any setbacks. So once again, no news, good news for me as long as he keeps rolling out there in the AAA games. The maximum for a position player to be considered on a rehab assignment is 20 games. So we got about another week and a half. So I don't think we hear anything from Kansas City this weekend telling us exactly when we'll see Michael Massey again. And in fact, that's my hope. That'll keep the price down a little bit where he's still available, where he wasn't held. Michael Massey has some availability out there. I think once we know exactly when he's coming back, that previous week he's a must add. So grab him now if you can.
There you go. I get the Michael Massey exposure where you possibly can. Always good to work your way in a week early or two. So good call out there. A lot of random news happening over the course of us recording. It's probably not, not one of these things where it's like knock on wood, it's not worth spending any time on. But just should be noted that Loris Curiel Jr. did leave his game on Friday with left elbow soreness. So keep an eye on what happens with the Diamondbacks situation in their lineup over the weekend and how if and when he returns throughout the weekend as well. And then something we didn't really talk about, Kevin, I want to kind of throw it in there is we talked about how the Rockies are not really producing, and they did get some pieces back as well with Brendan Rodgers returning from the IL. They also brought back our boy, or at least my boy, Sam Hilliard to the major league roster. Can't imagine.
I forgot about that. I knew you'd bring it up though when I saw
Gotta
it.
bring it up somehow. Unfortunately, it's at the expense of Charlie Blackmon, who hits the IL, who's been out for a couple days already. So that's retroactive to the 19th of June with a right hamstring issue. And then the prospect we just talked about last week, Adele Amador, he hits the 10-day IL as well with right oblique tightness. So we won't see those guys at least for the following week and then probably into the week after as well. So keep an eye on what's happening in Colorado. Those might be some options for you as far as Brendan Rodgers. Maybe they treat Sam Hilliard a little bit nicer than they had in the past. I'm not holding my breath on that one, though. Any interest? Colorado has that split schedule. Actually, sorry, no, they're on the road the entire week. So is this even
5
a
games.
non-starter here? Any of these options?
So I think 5-game week all on the road. Those that have a lot of room, looking forward, any of these guys you like, that you can get them for $1 this week. Nobody wants them. So if you have room on your roster, you should take a look at how you feel this Colorado lineup is going to work itself out for the weeks going forward. The next couple of weeks prior to the All-Star break is 2 or 3 after this week, maybe only 2. So that's what I would be looking at. That schedule, if I have a healthy roster and a couple of stash spots, because nobody's going to bid on these guys with a 5-game week and them all being on the road.
Yeah, Brandon Rodgers only 17% rostered in the online championships in those 12 teamers. So readily available out there due to his, injury situation. I guess I'm more curious to see what kind of drop rate we see on Blackmon and Amador due to their completely opposite age spectrums and history. But Kevin, closes out here with any final thoughts taking us into the 14th Fab run of the 2024 season.
Yeah, it's like this all season long, but we're at that point of the season where there's just so much to take into consideration. So this is where I'm going to one of the things I say often, multiple times throughout the season. All the little things add up to a big thing. So as much as we have going on and as difficult as it is, try to check all the boxes, whether it's for Fab, whether it's when you're setting your lineups, whether it's when you're looking for guys you're interested in Fab or in the leagues where you can pick guys up on a daily basis. Try to remember all the little things, the schedules, the handedness of the pitch in, the Certain guys are you know, we talked about Ramon Urias earlier, not just this season, but career, kind of a reverse splits guy. He does have over 1,000 plate appearances where that actually means something. So just all the little things, not forgetting, we just had Father's Day. The bids were really light in my leagues. I know part of it was who was available last week and who we were bidding on, but it was also there was a lot of teams that didn't bid on anybody that could have used some help in a lot of leagues. 4th of July is coming up. We know that's a big one. Right? Yeah, I think TGFBI a couple of years ago, I was the only player in my league that made a bid on 4th of July weekend. So I know it's in the middle of the week this year. So that's 2 weekends people will be celebrating it, right? All these little things, it's worth it. It's worth it. It helps because my timeline's full of fantasy football draft information right now, right? That other people are going to get distracted and not check all these boxes. And yep, won't be the last time I bring this up with multiple times a year, but it's we're at that point in the year where every little thing matters.
Yeah, this is definitely the time of year where you start seeing all the analysts out there that do both, right? That do baseball and football slowly but surely start moving into football. And those are really the only pieces of my timeline that are showing up with football. I don't really play a lot of fantasy football anymore, but obviously all those writers and those podcasters who do both, I start seeing that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's about that time, huh? All right. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 160.
Can I interject real quick, Adam?
Please.
Real quick, because of a comment Uncle Ted just made, that you can never have enough arms. Bats on your bench is dumb. I used to believe that. I used to believe that. Now it depends on format, right? NFBC, where our pitching lineup is set for the week, but we can change our hitters on Friday. It took me a couple of seasons to learn this, but one or two pitchers on my bench, and I want to back up at every offensive position. That's why even a guy like Ezekiel Duran, who isn't performing outstanding but qualifies everywhere, is on several of my 15-team leagues because he covers a lot of positions, right? But I want to back up at every single position. So I disagree with what Ted is saying there for NFBC formats and any format really where you can change your hitting lineup in the middle of the week, but not your pitchers. I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's fine. And I mean, the daily moves leagues are a little bit different as well, where
Yeah,
you're just trying to stream in as much volume as possible on the pitching side. So I totally get the logic of having minimal amount of bats, but I agree with you as
100%.
far as having whatever that, like, let's just say you have one bench bat. You want that one bench bat to be able to fill in as many positions as possible, because even in
Right.
those daily moves leagues, you're also trying to volume your way into more at bats as well. So something to keep in mind, depending on your league and what everybody else is doing. I have somebody in my
Exactly.
head-to-head league that has 10 bench bats. He's not competing, and he's playing for next year and year the after. But it was amazing to go through everybody's roster because I was just trying to like, oh, what's everybody's doing? Okay, you've got one, you've got two, you've got three, two, three, 10. What? All right. I get what you're doing here. That's fine. But we'll see if he does that the same thing next year. With all that in mind and everything else we talked about, that is going to wrap it up for episode 169 of On the Wire. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is Hasting Kevin. Of course, follow the pod at On the Wire Pod. After all that, I am Adam Howe. On behalf of Kevin Hastings, thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.